Going into the ninth and final round of the Sinquefield Cup, Levon Aronian led the field by a clear point. But he faced Veselin Topalov. Not the easiest pairing. You always know that Topalov is going to go for it. And indeed, it was a very interesting opening. Topalov gave up a pawn. And you can see that for it he's got a very nice centre. He's got active pieces. That rook has just moved to b1, attacking the b5 pawn. And crucially, Black's kingside pawn structure has been rather damaged. So an interesting position on the board. If bishop c6, then you can take on c5, get the pawn back. But Aronian seemed to have things under control. He'd played his opening, and up to here, incredibly quickly. Topalov had taken his time. And here, after not much thought, Aronian played f5. This was taken, and rook takes b5. But Aronian remained pawned up by taking on f3, and then c takes d4. Again, not much thought behind these moves. So Aronian's still a pawn up here, and I mean it's a very tricky position. Topalov played queen c1, and now here, so basically this queen is heading over to the kingside, and here if Aronian wanted to, he could have played queen e7 to cover the g5 square and possibly play for a win. I think white is probably alright, but instead Aronian played very pragmatically. He took this pawn, which virtually forces white into going for a perpetual. So this is what happened. Rook takes f5, an exchange of rooks, and here it's perpetual check, and so on. So that draw meant that Aronian was the winner of the tournament. No one could catch him with that draw. And I think a really excellent achievement. He played the most consistent chess of everyone in the tournament. And when he had his chance, he seized it very well. He scored nice attacking victories against Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana. Showed really good opening preparation, and against Nakamura he outplayed Hikaru in a very nice strategic game. So 6 draws, 3 wins. Well, what was the difference between his performance here and Norway Chess, where he had a disaster just a couple of months ago? Well, Norway Chess, his opening preparation, I'm afraid, was a little bit lacking. And he got shown up tactically in a few games. So Levon has really kind of turned things around. His opening preparation this time was excellent. So well done to him. The most interesting game of the round was Hikaru Nakamura against Alexander Grischuk. This was an extraordinary game, actually. Nakamura had white. He took some incredible risks to get an interesting position, and Grischuk was definitely better around about move 30, 35, but then in his habitual time pressure the game swung round, and by the time they reached move 40, which is here, Nakamura with white definitely has the advantage. Reminds me a little bit of a Nimzo Indian. In fact, it came from a bishop b5 check Sicilian, but you know, if you can imagine a bishop on b4 taking on c3, and a similar kind of pawn structure with black playing f5 and exchanging on e4, white's better. 2 bishops and nice open files, potential pressure on these pawns, and if you look around black's king, there are some juicy weakened dart squares. Let's see how Nakamura played this. Still not an easy position. So first of all, he put some pressure on the d pawn. That looks very natural. So black waits, and here I was commentating on this game live, and I thought that queen f2 would be a nice move, just stepping out of the way of the rook on e8, maybe potentially going for f5, perhaps manoeuvring this bishop into h4 and via h4 and g5 into h6, or maybe queen h4. That seemed like a nice idea to me. Hikaru played in a much more direct way, h4, and he just wants to play h5 here and open up this diagonal. Rook f8, okay, that's a good defensive move. It means that if h5, black can take, and after queen d3, in fact, the rook has made room for the knight to retreat, and that pawn is covered by the rook. So Nakamura waited for a bit. Rook f2. Okay, he's got an idea behind this one as well. Now rook b1, that's an excellent move. The rook would certainly like to come into b6, looking, well, obviously at the bishop, but also the a pawn. Dangerous move. I mean, this virtually forces black into taking the pawn on a5, but while the queen is away, then that gives white the perfect opportunity to attack on the king's side. It rather reminds me of a classic military coup, where the president of a country flies away on some foreign visit and then the military take over while the president's away. So here we go. h5, storming the palace. Opening up this diagonal. Now, with the rook coming to f2, this was the big idea. He's forcing through f5, so this opens up black's kingside and also gives white a very dangerous pawn. So you can see these diagonals opening here and diagonals around black's king as well. Really dangerous, and so black has to scurry back with his queen, otherwise it'll be, well, completely lost. f6, good move. If this is taken, then it's going to be mate. A rook check. You can see how useful that rook move, rook b1, was. The rook has to block, and then queen d3, and white breaks through. So after f6, the knight had to come back, and bishop h4. So with this pawn on f6, supported by rook and bishop, that controls absolutely key squares in black's position. It's very hard for black to break out now. Queen h6, the queen coming in. Look at this fantastic diagonal of the bishop. Rook g8. Okay, well this shows that black has potentially a little bit of counterplay. You can see that white's king has no pawn cover. Very tricky position. In fact, I mean, I don't want to go into too much depth. In practical terms, rook g1 is probably the most sensible move in this position, just to take a bit of pressure off the king. Instead, Nakamura selected rook e1, and this does look deadly. The rook would like to come down to e7, and then that threatens a checkmate straight away with queen h7. It looks fatal, but in fact Grischuk was able to break out with d5, and now we can see that diagonal is open to the king, and suddenly there are threats for black as well. Queen h5 played by Nakamura on a check, and I thought Nakamura played a really brave move in this position. Those of us who are scaredy cats would probably play queen e5, get the queens off, and well, I think white is still better in that endgame, but obviously black has survival chances. Instead, Nakamura played rook e5, a self pin. Now that is really risky when the king is kind of floating around. And Grischuk responded with d4, excellent move. Wants to play d3 to shut out that bishop, and suddenly white is rather hamstrung in this position with that pin. Yeah, I noted down the times here actually, because they were already into the second time phase after move 40. Nakamura had 8 minutes remaining. Grischuk had around about 2 minutes remaining, and that's for all the moves. So it's to a finish now. So each time they played a move, they would get 30 seconds increment. But yeah, the players are both running down right to the wire, so very difficult to play this extremely tactical position when there's a completely fluid pawn structure. Well, no pawn structures to speak of. It's just piece play. Very, very difficult. Queen d4, good move from Grischuk. Rook e7. So he's trying to get his queen through to the king. And now he took. This is strong. And here he missed a good move. He should have played queen g7. Very hard to tell what's good and bad when you're so short of time. Obviously this starts to threaten some really nasty stuff down here. White can defend with bishop g5, but black should be okay in this position. I mean, it's probably a draw with best play, but okay, it's irrelevant really. Queen d6 was played on just a few seconds thought, and this does look very, very strong considering, look at the pieces firing round white's king. King went up, bishop d7, it looks really good. In fact, Naka has it under control. He's played so bravely in this game. And again, this check looks really dangerous. Obviously that can't be taken as a pin. In fact, after rook f3, black has nothing better than to trade pieces. The queen is threatened as well as mate. So queens were traded. So obviously white is better in this endgame with the pawn on e7. But watch Nakamura's technique. Both players, particularly Grischuk, running short of time. Naka didn't have so much time. He was down to, a few minutes. He had something like 5 or 6 minutes remaining. King g7. Now, if the king can come over and somehow contribute to the defence, then black has a chance to save the game. But watch how Naka plays this. He could take on c5. This is better for white, but it's not so clear with the king coming across. Instead he played bishop g3. This is a really, really good move. Threat is bishop e5 check. Well, this is what happened. h6, so you have to play this to make room for the king. And after check, you can see, this is a forced sequence, and now the king has to go back. So black is locked into this position. And now another beautiful maneuver with the bishop. This bishop is wins the prize for the hardest working piece in this game. Well, black is so short of moves. That nut can't move. It's controlled by the bishop. Whoops, those squares are controlled by the bishop. So Grischuk punts the a pawn. Nakamura takes on h6. The pawn goes on. Well, this could be stopped with bishop c1, but this is very simple. Nakamura allows that pawn to run, but takes on c5, and now gets back in time. In fact, there's no danger at all because black is so tied up. Here's a sneaky move, bishop a1. I like that. He's hoping to end the game quickly. He's tempting Grischuk into playing rook g1, after which white wins the rook on g1. Knight e8. Black can only wait here. And it really is over. There are various ways to win this position, but pushing the c-pawn is the most sensible. And this is good fun. The king comes up the board and threatens mate here. Knight e8. And now after c7, Grischuk actually resigned. If this is taken, then rook f7 clearly wins. And if knight g7 check, that gets taken. Well, this is incredibly easy. You can make a queen, and that threatens rook h8. And the only way to stave off instant mate is to do this, but in fact this is also checkmate. Next move, king g7, you get a knight, for example, or indeed queen g6. Really brave game by Nakamura, and he finished in joint second place with 5 out of 9. Carlsen, Vasiliagrov and Giri were also on 5, but Aronian a clear point ahead on 6. Thanks very much for watching my reports. If you like them, then please do subscribe to the Power Play Chess channel on YouTube. I post reports and various other things regularly, and there are also interviews and, well, a whole load of other videos you can watch. Thanks for watching.